No other manufacturer evokes quite as much love and frustration at the same time as Alfa Romeo. Today I want to talk about the four pillars behind the fall and the fall of this much loved car maker. We all know about the issues to do with quality and service that have dogged Alfa for years, and that is indeed one of the four pillars. But perhaps less obvious are the following: Alfa's move to mass market, the impact of the Italian unions, and lastly, and perhaps most significantly of all, the takeover by Fiat. Alfa Romeo is not in good shape. In 2010, Sergio Marchionne predicted that the company would be selling 500,000 cars by 2014. It's now 2019, and they're still only predicted to sell this year about 127,000 cars worldwide. The Stelvio and the Giulia were supposed to be the breakthrough models that were going to bring this ailing company back to life. And they have done reasonably well, but nowhere near enough. Alfa Romeo's sales in February this year, going year to year, have dipped by 35%. Now you think that wouldn't be so bad because the market generally is not very good. However, when you start to consider that Volvo, Dacia, even Citroen's DS are significantly up, the picture starts to look a little bit different. Even Seat, a car company started in the 1950s by a dictator, just selling rebodied Fiats, is actually up on last year. Seat can't match the history, the romance, and the passion of Alfa cars, and yet a recent survey shows that people between the ages of 20 and 35 are more likely to know about Seat than Alfa Romeo, and that paints a really bleak picture. In 1915, Nicola Romeo added Romeo to Alfa and made Alfa Romeo. He took over the company. By the 1920s, Alfa was already established as one of the top car makers in the world. The Torpedo, the car that they had out at the time, had notable successes on the racetrack, and Enzo Ferrari was actually racing for Alfa Romeo at the time. In the 1930s, fascism took over and the Italian government nationalised Alfa Romeo, but it was actually during this period that they produced some of their most amazing cars. The 8C, for example, had huge successes in the Mille Miglia and Le Mans. In 1954, there was another evolution to the company as the Giulietta was launched. This was a pretty amazing car for the time. When other people were using pushrod steel engines, Alfa was already using double overhead cam, all aluminium engines. They were really way ahead of the pack, and they were making some really exciting, fantastic cars. The late 60s for me was the last gasp of the real Alfa Romeo. The 105 series was launched. We have an example of that here, and funnily enough, this is a car that I myself used to own. It was also the time when the unions started having a really big impact on the company. They were very militant, modelling themselves on sort of communist cells, and they made it very hard for Alfa Romeo to be able to continuously produce, in quality, but also in terms of quantity. Essentially, it was almost impossible for Alfa to turn a profit. 1972 heralded what should have been Alfa's renaissance and move into the mass market with the Alfa Sud. At the same time, Volkswagen launched, or 2 years later in 74, the Golf, and they haven't looked back ever since. Volkswagen used to be a little maker of Beetles and vans. No one really regarded them as much, and look at what they've turned into now compared to Alfa. Now, the problem with the Alfa Sud was that it was a brilliant car. It handled amazingly well, it looked stylish, it was really well packaged, and yet the usual problems with Alfa let it down. The quality wasn't very good, it wasn't very reliable, and rust affected it quite badly. We then moved forward. There was a few sort of transition models. There was the 33 and the 75, which, to be honest, we all had to make excuses for. They had some good aspects. They were nice to drive, they had nice engines, but overall, they just didn't hit the mark. One of the biggest blunders when Fiat took over is that they didn't allow the various makes that they had to compete with each other. So Lancia was supposed to be the luxury maker, Alfa was supposed to be the sports maker, Fiat was just supposed to make cheap cars, Ferrari was the supercar maker, Maserati was somewhere along that spectrum. The problem is that they actually managed, they were worried about cannibalizing the sales of each other's makers, but what they actually ended up doing was not producing enough of a variety of cars to satisfy the market. Since then we've had cars like the 155, which was completely lackluster, and cars like this 156. So we've had little blips where they've sort of tried to kickstart the company, and they maybe launched one model which either looked good or was passable. But they've never managed to be able to continue to actually lay out a whole series of models in the same way as the Germans have. They haven't been able to keep up with that marketing, they haven't been able to keep up with the way that the cars are produced, the quality, and just the number of variations, and that has led us to where we are today. It's widely thought that Marchionne saved Fiat. I think he did save Fiat, but at the same time, he never had the outlook that he was going to try and make Fiat an independent, strong automaker. He always tried to package it in a way that he would make it sellable and palatable for someone else. And he courted the various car makers for years, Ford, General Motors, to try and buy Fiat or bits of Fiat. That's not happened, and Marchionne is no longer here. But what does the future herald for Alfa? Well, we're at a time where Alfa Romeo actually has essentially a two-car range. It has the Giulia and the Stelvio. That's absolutely ludicrous if it's trying to compete with the likes of Audi, who have, between the various niche models and so on, I think they produce about 65 different models. There's no way that Alfa's ever going to make it. I don't really see a bright future. Someone will take it over, but the longer it carries on as it is, the more that downfall is going to continue. We all know about the quality and service issues that have dogged the mark. Why do I talk like a dick? Of this once revered automaker. Fucking hate that. By the 1920s, Alfa's reputation as a top-line car maker. By the 1920s, Alfa was already established as one of the top car makers in the world. The Torpedo, the car that was launched